Xtreme ヴィーナスバケーション
Scientists recovered T-Rex soft tissue. It was supposedly 70 million years old. Red blood vessels, red blood cells, completely unfossilized. You know why that's so interesting? Because these two artifacts are separated chronologically in time by hundreds of years, and separated geographically by hundreds of kilometers, which means two different people groups at two different times in history recorded these creatures in the exact same activity. It's so common they give it a name. It's called the epistotonic death pose, and it's typical of creatures having died in water, drowned, asphyxiated, died in water, drowned, asphyxiated. Interesting, isn't it? That's the only explanation I've never heard a modern-day evolutionist give, that perhaps there was a global flood. Because, see, that would be religious.
今日も元気そうじゃな。さあ、さっさと遊びに行くぞ。
How do we know about the dinosaurs? They're not around today because of their bones, correct? Where did those fossils come from? Well, that's the next F, the flood. Genesis 6-9, the worldwide flood recorded in the Bible. The fountains of the great deep burst open. There was 40 days of intense rain. Do we even know what 3 days of torrential rain will do now? Yes, we do, because we've recorded it now. All the sediments and the biomass gets mixed up together and it starts making slurries and so on. Even evolutionists now are admitting this because the evidence is just so overwhelming. Here's Dr. Phil Curry. He works with the Royal Tyrrell Museum. He wrote a book called 101 Questions About Dinosaurs. Now watch what he says. He believes in millions of years. He believes in the story of evolution, but look at what he says. Fossilization is a process that can take anything from a few hours to millions of years. I wonder which one of those two processes Dr. Curry has observed. He goes on to say, well, the amount of time that it takes for a bone to become completely permineralized is highly variable. If the groundwater is heavily laden with minerals in solution, the process can happen rapidly. And I would bet at the time of the Great Flood, there was lots of minerals and lots of stuff in the solution that would make a lot of fossils very quickly. Mary Schweitzer did this experiment with these tyrannosaur bones she found, and here was the title of her article: Scientists recovered T-Rex soft tissue. It was supposedly 70 million years old. Red blood vessels, red blood cells, completely unfossilized. That's like walking out into the Sahara Desert and finding an ice cream cone. It's not supposed to be there. Well, if all these fossils we find could have soft tissue in them, that confirms what the Bible says, that the earth is young, not millions and millions of years old, because chemical decomposition rates simply don't allow for soft tissue to last for millions of years.
準備はできておるか？ 楽しもうぞ。落ち着いて、焦らないで。落ち着いて。
Many people have questions about the ark and how dinosaurs would fit. Genesis 6:19 and 20 talks about how the fact that, two of all living creatures, male and female, every kind of animal is going to go into the ark to be kept alive except for the dinosaurs. No, it doesn't say that. Oh no, every creature. So that would include the dinosaurs. Well, let's get back to the true depiction of the ark. 483 tractor-trailer trucks could fit on board that boat. But still, people have this idea in their head, but okay, even though the boat was that big, how do you get a 70-ton titanosaur on Noah's Ark? But you have to remember, just like every creature, they didn't start off huge. Here's the largest dinosaur egg we've ever found. That thing didn't pop out of there weighing 70 tons. And by the way, the commandment was the creatures were to go on board the ark to reproduce, right, after the flood. So you're not going to take like grandma and grandpa dinosaur on board. You're going to take the young ones, the teenagers, so to speak, because they're going to be virile and be able to reproduce and so on. So the flood has great explanatory power for the fossils. Why has the account of this, if people really saw dinosaurs, because if they came on board the ark, they went off, people would have seen them. So why is this kind of faded from people's memory? Do you know there are dragon legends around the world? Do you know people groups around the world say that in their histories, people saw these huge reptilian beasts? There are so many accounts, it's hard to keep track of them all, so much so that up until 1973, In the World Book Encyclopedia, they actually had this entry. The dragons of legend are strangely like actual creatures that have lived in the past. They are much like the great reptiles, dinosaurs, which inhabited the earth long before man is supposed to have appeared on earth. Even staunch atheists and evolutionists like Carl Sagan, he wrote a book called Dragons of Eden, and he said the pervasiveness of dragon myths in the folk legends of many cultures is probably no accident. It's a worldwide phenomenon. The Chinese zodiac has all sorts of real creatures that we know of, and it also includes dragons. Why would they only include one mythological creature with all the other creatures? And some of the oldest artifacts we can find, things like this Mesopotamian cylinder seal. Look at what these creatures look like. Long necks, long tail, dinosaur fossils like this one here. Look at the bones on this thing. Imagine what that thing looked like with flesh on it. I'll show you National Geographic's depiction of it. What would you call that if it was running towards you? I'd call it a dragon, right? And other things like, in Cambodia, they've got this temple supposedly built about 800 years ago. See the round circles here and the carvings? Look at the creature. See his tail? See the plates on his back? See his face and his eye? They saw it. That's the most logical conclusion. When I was over in England, I didn't actually get to go to Carlisle Cathedral. Bishop Bell was buried in the floor. They did that back then. It was kind of weird. And you'll see this carpet on the floor. It's because his tomb has brass inlay around it with all these different creatures. And as people have walked on it over the years, it wears out the brass. But if you get them to pull back the carpet, you can see all the different creatures it depicts, like birds. Let's see some of the other creatures they depict. Dog, yep. Fish, yep. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Big long necks, big long tails. You know what's interesting too? Do you remember that Mesopotamian cylinder seal? Do you remember the way their necks were entwined? Oh, that's very interesting. You know why that's so interesting? Because these two artifacts are separated chronologically in time by hundreds of years, and separated geographically by hundreds of kilometers, which means two different people groups at two different times in history recorded these creatures in the exact same activity. Like rams banging their heads together or giraffes necking? And that's not the only one. Here's the Narmer Palette, and it depicts them in the same way. Another people group, different point in time. What's the most logical conclusion? They saw them. That makes most sense. Now, why is that downplayed in the evolutionary community? Well, I don't think I could give you a better quote. This is a hostile witness, Louis Jacobs, and he's written a book about dinosaurs, and he's a skeptic, he's an atheist, he's an evolutionist, and here's what he said. Such an association, what people called dragons generically in the past actually being dinosaurs, such an association would dispel an Earth with vast antiquity. The entire history of creation, including the day of rest, could be accommodated in the 7 biblical days of the Genesis myth. Evolution would be vanquished. See what he just admitted? Man, if people actually saw these things, evolution's a dead duck. And I'm an atheist and I don't want to believe in God. So I have to have a way of explaining everything without God. What's the only explanation in town? Evolution of some sort.
Touchdown.